Now, hardly a video goes by where I'm not ranting about story. But today, you don't have to hear it from me, because I've got a guest, like a real life person. Hi, I'm Scott. You're watching Inside Musicals, the channel for all things musical theatre. Now, ever since I started this channel, I've wanted to bring in other people for their expertise, for their perspectives. And when I read a book by a friend of mine, the marvellous Tim Wood, I knew he had to be my first guest. Now, we're both obsessed with story, but for different reasons. He's in marketing, I'm in theatre, but we're both searching for that same essence, that same truth. Now, in his book, Your Amazing Brand Story, he shares a simple approach to connecting with your audience through their experience of story. And he's worked with some of the biggest companies in the world, so he's doing something right. Now, it's not a short chat, so grab yourself a cup of tea, maybe a gin. I don't judge. It's after 5 somewhere. I'll come back to the book at the end because I have a special link for you. But now, he's the man himself. Funny, articulate, brilliant. We've got you in today. We've known each other since we're at drama school.
30 years.
Yeah.
Bang.
That's weird since I'm only 30 years old. But for a lot of your career, you've worked in marketing. How did you get from there to here?
Yes, good question. I gave the musical theatre and acting a red-hot crack for probably the better part of 12 years, including study, and came to the daunting realisation I was a triple threat to myself. I remember I had 2 moments. I remember I was auditioning for The Boy From Oz when it first opened, mid-90s, I think, or something, late 90s in Melbourne. And Gail Edwards was directing, and we were in the audition doing the whole thing, and I was giving it everything. And you've seen me dance. And it was going fucking everywhere.
You've got lots of limbs.
It was everywhere. And Gail said, "Tim, can you come here?" And I was like, "I'm on."
Front and centre.
She said, "From here up, you are amazing." She said, "Any chance we can get some coordination?" And I said, "No." She said, "Okay."
Oh, that's devastating.
She was lovely. I actually walked away feeling I am amazing from here up. The rest is a train wreck. And then I realised, maybe this is not me. I went to London and decided I want to be in marketing, and was lucky enough to get a job at McDonald's selling Happy Meals. Well, actually, my job was to make Ronald McDonald cool again.
Right. Wow.
Failed.
Was that the actual brief?
It was, make it cool again.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was at that point where I realised, because when I went into the corporate world, I kind of put, you know how when you finish something, you put it in a box and put it away, and it's like, okay, that's the end of that chapter. I'm going to start a new chapter. So I did that. You know, what has acting and performance got to do with marketing? Nothing. So I went over here, and then as time went on, I went, where's the connection? Where's the emotion? Where's the stories? Like they kind of disappeared. So I started pulling out the box, if you like, and going, I know how to connect. Like, I've studied how to tell stories. Why aren't we doing this in a corporate environment? Why, when you get up to sell into a sales team, why is it so boring? And why, when the finance guy gets up and talks through the numbers, does everyone switch off? What if you wrapped it in a story? What if you had some fun? What if you got people to laugh and bought a bit of time and then started talking through the serious things? So that's what I started to do internally at McDonald's and then at Nike. And it worked, and I then took that externally to go, well, what if we did this with consumers? What if we created events, and I took all the stuff that I know and love about theatrics and how to create a theatrical experience, and did it in a sporting environment with events. And so that love of theatre and musicals, I don't use the word musicals, but when I'm talking to corporates, I call it theatre. It continues, and I now see so much correlation between the two.
You know, on this channel, I do talk about story a lot, and one thing that really surprised me about a book on marketing was how central story was. You said that stories help people listen, or get people listening. So what is special about story?
Story is a tool that helps you connect. I think that's all it is. So marketing is not storytelling. marketing is positioning a brand to be the solution to another person's problem. So you've got to understand what their problem is. Who's your audience? What do they want? How do I help them get it? That's that connection. Story is a really helpful tool. That's all it is. That allows you to, from a marketing point of view, create a more emotional connection. So the science of story, which is really well written about and talked about, and as artists, we try and work out, ways to shape a story to create a connection. That's the art form, and stories can be told in many ways. But from a marketing point of view, it's simply a tool. Yeah.
And so the equivalent in the acting world is we're asking, what's their motivation?
I'll go and see a show, and when you're watching it and you have that beautiful moment of the darkness of a theatre, and you're in that suspension of disbelief, and then it's broken. That for me becomes fascinating, because you go, why was that? I was totally there, and then I wasn't. And so I think for me, I break it down into three components of what makes a good story. And I think this is true for the marketing world or the theatre world, is truth, structure, and narrative. So truth, what is it about? What is the seed? What is the essence of what we're talking about? And we were talking about this earlier. Finding that essence is kind of the key that then unlocks what should stay in and shouldn't stay in.
It's like the filter.
Yes. So, Kinky Boots. The essence of that, for me, and I love that show, is about acceptance. So if you boil everything down, and you can, these are such wonderful debates to have, and they're the debates I love. You can literally have hours over a glass of red wine after a show going, what is the essence? What was that show about? But if you land on it, and then you go, right, so if a scene is not helping a character, helping the audience understand a character's journey to acceptance of a father, acceptance of your sexuality, acceptance of whatever
or challenging it in some way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then get rid of it, because it's not furthering the plot. It's not helping the audience have a better understanding of acceptance. I love The Music Man, one of my favourite shows. So what's it about? And I've come to the conclusion that it's about belief. So you've got this con man that comes into a small town in Iowa, and he wants to be believed. And so he goes about all these cunning ways of creating belief. And then he wants the only other musician in town, the librarian, to believe in him. And so he works...
Probably the smartest person in the town.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And then her younger brother, Winthrop, remember that character?
The lisp.
With the lisp. And then this magical thing happens, because Harold Hill believes in this kid who is a bit awkward, and he's got this speech impediment, and suddenly Winthrop is doing shit that his older sister, Marion, I think her name was, and she's blown away. And so she goes, oh my God, here's this cunning fox that has suddenly shown belief in a child, and that spreads to all the children. And they can't play music, but they believe they can. And then so this exploration of belief, her belief in him, and then his belief in himself, he doesn't shoot through. He stays and cops it, for the first time ever. He goes, and that's at that elevated experience. And so the journey through, so I talked about belief, structure, and narrative. Structure, I suspect we'll debate this one, but every great story has a really clear structure, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in my world, in the marketing world, I call it problem, fight, and change. So from what I can see, every story starts with a problem. If there isn't a problem, there's no need for the audience to care, because the character's not fighting for anything. They're not wanting to achieve anything. So the structure of a story, whether you start like Hamilton starts with a prologue and you get the whole story and it's all there. So what's the problem? The problem is I now need to know how he went from an orphan no one to being such an important figure in the creation of America. That's not the essence of the story, but it's the structure. And then the fight. You know, what are the different ways we can try and solve this? And then the final stage being the elevation, the elevated perspective. So I wanted this. It didn't work out the way that I thought it would, but I've actually come out as an audience member, and that's because the characters have with an elevated perspective of what that means. Yeah. And then the last one is narrative. At the end of each stage, problem, fight, change. If the audience don't deeply care about the character, don't deeply care, you don't dare go on to that next stage because they don't give a shit. They're going to switch off. And that's the moment in the theatre when you start thinking about something else. What just happened then? Moulin Rouge, the film, does it beautifully. The musical, I'm not sure that it does. Amazing performers, amazing production. It's not a criticism of that. Personally, I sat there and gone, if this is about the most important thing you'll ever learn is to be loved and be loved in return. That's pretty profound. And so that's what the film revolves around, that essence of each character is searching for love. The Bohemians, Satine, Ziegler, they're all searching in their own way. Then I went and saw the musical, and it's tits and ass for the first 20 minutes in Moulin Rouge. Spectacular, amazing. But there wasn't any connection, and I didn't care about the Bohemian. I didn't care enough as an audience member about the Bohemians' passion to put this show on and what it meant to them. Therefore, for me, the foundation of the show was lost because it went into the money and the fight, and I wasn't on the journey.
Because in that instance, then those production numbers just feel like a distraction.
Yeah.
I found that in Muriel's Wedding, the stage production, because for me, I think it would have been better as a more intimate story, exploring those characters. When I kept getting production numbers of characters I didn't know, I found myself constantly frustrated. I wanted to know more about the mother, and we never did. And maybe that was part of her thing. But as an audience, I was much more interested in her than a chorus line of people in bathing suits or something. So yeah, you do have to come back to that essence to determine what actually belongs. Because I think, particularly in musicals, there is a pressure to make it spectacular. If you've got this big budget, not that I think all shows should be a Broadway-sized show. I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make when they're making shows. But yeah, without that nugget, the rest just doesn't hold together.
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier. The search for that nugget is the quest of the writer, isn't it? To try and explore what is this story about, and while there's a setting around it that helps reveal that nugget, if you can't find that nugget and it doesn't stick.
Well, there's often a saying with writers, they're either pantsers or planners. People who fly by the seat of their pants just start writing, or people who plan in advance. And I actually think neither of those is entirely true. I think people who think they fly by the seat of their pants have to do an awful lot of editing later, and people who do a lot of planning up front are actually fleshing out their story more than maybe they think they are. It's just the difference between at which point you put that concrete final form. But I think both of them, there is that sense of exploration and then discovery that then leads to more exploration. So it's not a linear process. So I would certainly say to anybody writing or even working on a script, at face value, if you're an actor, you might think it's about one thing until you get into it. Then maybe you hear one line one day and you go, oh, that tells me something. If I backtrack and explore that, how does that change the way I play this character and give it more clarity? Yes.
And what's the character's... So what's the essence of the story, and what's the character's role in that essence of telling that story?
And using Music Man as an example, again, I mean, Harold's journey was from someone who was faking that belief or getting other people to to buy into a fake belief, into them being that thing. And so that gives him a clear journey. So even though belief itself seems like a static idea, the journey of going from faking it to being it is profound.
Totally, it's quite extraordinary. We all fake it, don't we? And fake confidence and all of that sort of thing. But then sometimes there is that switch where you go, no, actually, this is who I am. This is what I believe in.
Yeah.
Totally changing the topic. I reckon I'd be fascinated to get your take on this. It appears to me that since maybe the 90s, and maybe Sondheim started this, but many of the successful musicals have an opinion. And so Hamilton, again, the retelling of the American history through non-white eyes, I'm interested in it because of brand. So brand can come from a label or a person, but it can also come from a zeitgeist of what's happening in society at the time. So would have Hamilton worked if it was 30 or 40 years ago? I don't think it would have.
Wouldn't have got to stage, I wouldn't think.
No. But it's so relevant to our time. So maybe in the way Falsettos was, or Rent was, and in a way, this sounds weird because I don't rate it as a musical piece, Mormon, but it was incredibly controversial, and it carried that brand of South Park.
And yet, strangely, it was a very sweet story.
Yes.
For all its brashness on the surface,
yes,
it was a very sweet story. And I think, for me, the essence of that show was hypocrisy. And the main character who thought he was going to save the world on his own, he was brought down because he couldn't see past his hypocrisy. Whereas the other guy kind of rolled with the punches and found his place, and there was a more forthrightness. Yes, he embellished, and told his own stories.
Yes.
But he wasn't bound by that hypocrisy.
Yes, and so was that hypocrisy a reflection on what was happening in society at the time, do you think? So why did that show, that was crazy successful? Was it just the Trey Parker, Matt Stone factor?
Well, again, I think, for me, the South Park guys are kind of a guilty pleasure. The film Team America, if anyone asks me, I've never seen it. That's hysterical. It's one of those guilty pleasures because it hides how clever it is, in a way. And I think Book of Mormon was the same. On the surface, at first it annoyed me that it was kind of a parody of a musical with the songs. Yes. But it was this very sweet essence at its heart, because it also, even though it was called Book of Mormon, it actually wasn't about Mormons at all. It was hypocrisy. It still could apply to other religions, to business, with an overinflated sense of themselves, or any structure, really. I think that's why it succeeded, because it's a universal truth, which is valuable for one of those nuggets. But interestingly, Rodgers and Hammerstein, that I guess these days we look fondly on as old-fashioned musicals, were very wonderfully crafted. And something like South Pacific, both of those men felt very strongly about the idea of racism. And there was a lot of pressure on them not to include the song You've Got to Be Carefully Taught. Right. Fortunately, I think they were producing by that stage, so they got to call the shots. But there was a lot of pressure on them to drop it because it would make some people feel uncomfortable. So even Rodgers and Hammerstein had a purpose, something to say. They might have been limited by the expectation of Broadway as a family entertainment at the time. But a lot of their shows actually have something to say. And I think that's the power of storytelling. If it doesn't have something to say, we don't invest in it. Totally. Because it's not relevant.
No. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we talked for over an hour, so I did have to cut out quite a bit. But if you show Tim some love in the comments, maybe I'll edit together some more of our conversation about marketing and theatre. But you'd have to wait till then, because Tim has kindly shared the first chapter of his book that we can all read for free. Link in the description. And just to be clear, this video is not sponsored, no money's changed hands. It's just a bloody good read. It's personal, it's compelling, and full of insightful, practical advice for anyone who cares about story or connecting with an audience. Hard copies in bookstores, digital copies on Kindle, Audible, wherever you buy your books. So what do you think of this format? More guests?
Can I have a top up? Can I do this myself?
You can.
Do I have to press it?
Just rest it gently.
Oh, that's so satisfying. It's like a good piss. You want to piss in your cup?
Why not?